everyone. Welcome back to the Organizing to Victory podcast, where we're talking garage politics. I'm your host, Lee Perry, and today I have a special guest named Jane Aman, who is running for Florida House District 37 and is also a professor at the University of Central Florida here in Orange County. Her district intersects with Seminole County, where she was a Seminole County public school teacher. And we're so excited to dive into some of the policies she hopes to champion at the Florida legislature that intersect affordability, education, our economy, and the ability to have the next generation ready for what's to come. So let's get into my conversation with Jane. Hi, everyone. Today we have on Jane Aman, who is a Florida House of Representatives candidate for House District 37. Hi, Jane.
Hi.
How are you?
Yes, great.
I love the name Jane, first of all. I just want to start there. If I had a kid, I would name my daughter Jane. But yeah. How are you?
Really? It's an unusual name for younger generations, I feel like. So
it's just a cool name. And, I've seen you around and you have this really awesome aesthetic. You're always wearing lots of colors. You always have this really bright personality and you're young, which is fascinating for politics, which is why I was so eager to have you come on the podcast today to talk about your experience and growing up and where you're from.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. I was very excited to do this. So I'm from Virginia, originally, Northern Virginia, so the DC area. And I grew up there. I left when I was 20. I moved out to Texas, to El Paso. And that's where I finished my bachelor's degree, was at UT El Paso. And then I lived in Austin for a while and ended up coming out here. So.
That's so awesome. Were you like, I'm tired of snow. I'm ready to just jump into somewhere nice and hot. Or what was your motivator for getting out of the state?
Sure. I think it was a lot of, I'm a little bit of a person on the run all the time, in that I am, kind of constantly moving. And I think that in my early 20s, I really just needed a change. So I had gone to school for a little bit. I needed something a little bit different. And so I moved all the way across the country practically at that time and kind of took that risk. And it ended up being a wonderful choice at that time. So it wasn't necessarily needing to leave the weather so much as it was a need to kind of keep moving.
And so you got your education, and then what brought you to Florida?
My family lives here. So around COVID, I had some changes in my life and I ended up moving out here. My parents moved to Winter Park after we all flew the coop, and my mom is from here. She actually went to Winter Park High School, but she's from Claremont originally. So they always were eyeing coming down to Florida. And once we were all grown, my sister and my brother and I, they came down here. So I came to be close to them.
That's awesome. So I'm glad to hear that it wasn't the parks. You were like motivated by family.
Yes. Yes.
Which is always exciting because I interview a lot of people and the tourism side is like a real attractor to some folks, but it's exciting to hear that you came here to kind of build some foundation with your family here.
Yeah. No, it's great. My younger sister is also a UCF Knight, so she was already living here too. So it was a lot of coming to be close to everybody. For the first time in a long time, I lived a long ways away from them. So it's been really great. So
tell us about your education and what you chose to take a career path up in.
Sure. Like I said, I finished my degree, my bachelor's at UT El Paso. I got my undergrad in English, and then I got my master's and my PhD from UT Austin, and that was also in English. And I am currently a lecturer at the University of Central Florida, formerly a Seminole County high school teacher, and teaching is one of those things that I didn't really consider when I was in undergrad. Actually, I thought that I was going to do something advocacy related. When I was applying to grad school, I applied to law programs, and then I applied to one law school and one PhD program, and I got into both. And my 24-year-old self looked at this and went, hundreds of thousands of dollars in debt, or they'll pay for me the whole way through my PhD. And I decided to do that. But what happened was that part of the PhD process is that I got to teach. So in my own classroom, I was a TA, but we had our own separate discussion sections that we were teaching and in charge of. And I walked in there and I taught, and I swear that first day I walked out of that classroom and went, I could do this for the rest of my life.
Oh, yeah.
And
what was it?
I was teaching American literature, an American literature survey. And I brought in with me a poem that I loved at the time, which you've probably heard. It's called For Women Who Are Difficult to Love by Warsan Shire.
No, I haven't heard it.
It was when Warsan Shire's poetry was featured in Beyonce's Lemonade her video album. And so a lot of folks had read it at the time, but I brought it into class to say, here's a piece of me that I really love. And I shared it with the students. We had this really awesome conversation. And later on that semester, a student came up to me and she said, I printed that poem out and I put it up next to my dorm room bed. And it just means so much to me that you shared this with me. And it was like one of those first moments where you're like, oh, this makes a difference.
Yeah.
Right?
This is what teaching can lead to.
Yes.
Like fully inspiring someone inside and out.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And, how you're thinking outside the box and sharing, pieces of yourself as part of the teaching process is important.
Yeah. Everybody, I got my associate's degree in childhood education. I swore I was going to run into education and be the next Miss Frizzle. Like that was my dream. Science, biological sciences were my thing. And every single strong woman in my life was a teacher. And they told me, don't do it. You can't teach the way that they used to be able to teach. My godmother, my best friend's mom, they were all teachers. And they were like, you used to be able to have so much flexibility and freedom in the classroom. And now the metrics in which they're deriving their ideas of progress, those at the district level, are not giving teachers the ability to really shape individuals' needs in the classroom.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a real thing. But I was very lucky when I was teaching high school because we had wonderful administration in the high school where I was teaching, and they gave me a lot of leeway in how I designed my classroom and coursework and that kind of thing. I was also teaching seniors, which is a little bit different than when you're teaching grade levels that are subject to the state testing at the end of the year. So where it's a little bit more rigid that way. But that's a huge problem, right? You have so many teachers who are such bright stars and care about their students so much, and they are being hindered by what the state and the county and that kind of thing are coming in and telling them, like, no, you need to do X, Y, Z in this specific way. And if you don't do that, then you're going to get in trouble, or evaluations are not going to be good, or this kind of thing, that there are high stakes for people in their positions because of that kind of intervention. But the best teachers that I know don't just care. They're extremely creative in the ways that they engage with the students. And that's what students love and respond to.
Well, I definitely want to dive into all of that. But first I have to ask you, were you named after Jane Austen?
I was not named after Jane Austen. No, I was named after my great aunt, Jane Marshall. So that is where my full name comes from. Yeah.
Oh, it's beautiful. Mm-hmm. So I really believe in education, and I feel like, there's so many systemic issues with the system of education right now. And it's become a battleground in Florida since before Project 2025, where education has been a space for so much debate that it feels like teachers are the last to actually have input. So many book bannings, essential books that basically are the foundation of our culture. So many culture wars on whether or not a teacher is allowed to even put a picture of their significant other, if they're of the LGBTQ community, on their desk has been at the forefront of the fight in Florida, which is so odd to me. But, with all these different systemic issues, like, you chose to come to Florida and be an educator here and you still have a smile on your face. Like, how?
Mm-hmm. Well, first of all, I came to Florida as an educator from Texas. So,
True.
So that was a real lateral move in that way. But I think that I think it's just that I have found such a wonderful community of educators here in Florida. Just because the state treats educators poorly does not mean that we don't have world-class educators here.
Yeah.
And so it is, so that has always been really life-giving for me, and the students are really wonderful. Even after I left teaching at the high school where I was at the time, I continued to coach soccer there afterwards because I just loved the kids so much. It was just so much fun. And so that is part of it. You know, people talk about politics in the South like it's a lost cause sometimes. And the reality is that the South is where the work is.
Yep.
You know, if you don't really want to do the work, then go someplace that's, that everybody is like-minded and that kind of thing. Like the South is where the work is. And so teaching here, I think it's more important than ever that if you're a passionate educator and you can stand it, obviously there's, if you're a member of the LGBT community and you feel unsafe or let's say that your family, we're 50th in teacher pay. Let's say your family can't afford to stay here or, any number of reasons that people drop out that are totally valid. But if you can stand it, the work matters. Students need you. And I really believe that.
Florida, this is the whole reason why I created a podcast, because I don't want people to just look at the South, especially Florida, and be like, it's done. Let it drift off into the sea.
Yeah.
Like we're here, we're fighting. And I meet some of the most resilient people who share in that same fire of like, if I'm going to do politics or do education or do frontline work anywhere, I'm going to do it here.
Yeah.
Because I'm ready to roll up the sleeves to be a voice of those who can't necessarily fight. Like we have a lot of beautiful residents who are under attack right now. And it's a little bit of a, I don't want to even call it something along the lines of like having a savior's complex, because that sounds a little rude. But when you grow up and you are just so pissed, especially our generation, you shared with me that you're 33, I'm 35. Like I woke up in and was born in just systemic problems. And it feels like we've done nothing but feel like we're drowning and trying to crawl our way out of some of these historic problems that we inherited. And if you're willing to do that work, you come to Florida and you fight that fight with us, please.
Yeah, I think that's true. I think also that I'm very conscious of my own privilege in that I have the capacity, financially, I'm stable and I have the capacity for the kind of mental cognitive load, that kind of thing. And I think that using that privilege in a way that is advocating for other people who don't necessarily have that voice is one of the things that we have a duty to do as members of a society, right?
Yeah.
And that was perhaps not the most elegant way of articulating that. But
I totally hear you, because it is a privilege to be able to be an advocate and to be able to fight. You have to be in a place of comfort in order to have a full cup, enough to run into the flames and to run into the fire. So I'm grateful that you said that. First, we'll start with public school. If you had the ability to identify the top 3 problems and the top 3 solutions in working in the public school system, what would it be?
Oh man,
it doesn't have to be 3, but
yeah, I mean, all of it stems back to funding, right? That every single issue that we have in the public school system could be solved with most issues that we have in the public school system could be solved with more funding. Right. A lot of folks, even the best public school systems have a lot of issues with keeping up with school infrastructure, for instance, things like AC units that go out for long periods of time. I have a friend who works in an Orange County school and their AC went out several times and it was out for days. And or the same friend, there was a bad rainstorm and the ceiling of his classroom collapsed. And he had to teach his classes right before AP exams in the gym, which is impossible to do that kind of thing. And that kind of stuff is completely dependent on whether or not they have the funding to do that kind of infrastructure work and building work too. And it really disrupts students' ability to learn, to not have that kind of thing. There are other issues. You can talk about culture wars all day in Florida. I really see those. I mean, I think that they're a coordinated effort. I don't like using the word distraction, but I really see those as a means of not actually tackling the biggest issues that they have in the school system, because it's easy to point and say like, oh, well, but that we might not have done our job in this way, but like this is actually what's happening in the school districts. And it makes people like okay with the effort of defunding our public school system in this voucher program. This is the same tactic. I was just in Berlin, Germany. This is the same exact tactic that happened during the same time in the early 1960s when the Berlin Wall was going up, of like basically making culture wars the epicenter of why we need to restrict all these other aspects of daily life and making people okay with going along with it. Because if you have something to blame, then people aren't going to ask other questions about where's the funding for my kid's classroom's roof. They're going to say, oh, I don't like that teacher is spending time talking about their LGBTQ partner or whatever it is that they choose to make the front lines of their fight. So I'm curious about that, because I think exactly you hit it so perfectly on the head. We are quick to brush it off as a distraction. But these have real consequences, these fights that they choose to make the headline of every single thing that when it comes to our school board meetings and our policies. Well, so there's a way that I like to talk about that actually goes to a serious issue. You talked about like top 3 issues. I'll just give you 3 because I'm not sure how I would order them necessarily. But one of them is that we have a significant teacher shortage in Florida. If you do not start off the school year with a certified teacher in the classroom, there is a good chance that it is going to be a year of just rotating long-term subs. And because the conditions in Florida make it so that it's hard to recruit new teachers into the classroom. And it's also hard to keep veteran teachers in the classroom. But let's talk about how the culture wars feed into that. It was Brevard County where the teacher was lost her job for calling a student by their preferred name. That was a big story. And it was because in Florida, you have to, they send out forms at the beginning of every school year, and the parent has to sign off on the names that are allowed for their student. So if your name is Timothy and you go by Tim, your parent technically has to say, yes, you can call them Tim, and sign off on it and send it in. But this parent or this teacher was calling the student by their preferred name, and they were found to be going against this Florida law, right? And they were released. Well, that teacher was an AP teacher. I believe they'd been in that position for over a decade. And so let's talk about how we can talk about that outside of the culture wars. We have a teacher shortage in Florida. So let's say that teacher has 140 students. They're AP certified, right? They have all the institutional knowledge necessary to keep their curriculum going from year to year. So now all of those students, 140 students who are members of this community and their families are members of this community, they don't have a certified teacher in that classroom. They're going to have long-term subs for the rest of the year. Well, again, we have a teacher shortage. There's no guarantee they'll find somebody to replace that person for the next year. So now that's 280 students who are impacted because of this law that was coming out of that culture war, right? So this has real impacts on entire communities. And for what, right? For what? And so it is, I think that is maybe like where we need to be a little bit more diligent about talking about these things, that transphobia hurts everybody. 100%. But like, let's talk about functionally what that actually means.
It's so crazy because I am so quick to see an example like that and be like, oh, well, they're just making an example of that one teacher. Mm-hmm. And really, they're not going to have the infrastructure or the capacity to monitor every single teacher and every single name that they're calling every single student. Mm-hmm. So I just kind of brush it off in my head when I'm scrolling and seeing all this terror, thinking like, that's just a very micro example. But the longer term impacts are so substantial. Mm-hmm. You're impacting hundreds of students' lives.
Yeah. And even if that teacher regains their job later on, I mean, why would they want to work in that environment? Why would new teachers want to work in an environment where they could get fired for calling a student by the wrong name? Mm-hmm. And I'm wrong in quotes, right? Like, mm-hmm. So the student's preferred name, which is just a normal human thing to do, right? So it's absurd. And it has absolutely nothing to do with quality of education. Mm-hmm. Or frankly, even they like to talk about this in terms of parents' rights, but what about all of the other parents whose kids are now going without a certified teacher in the classroom? Mm-hmm. Right? That's so impactful. Excuse me. So impactful beyond just one student.
Yeah. And, I knock doors a lot in House District 37 because I ran now Senator Carlos Guillermo Smith in that mm-hmm. race in 2022. And it was so interesting because at the time, the consultants were really pushing us to speak to other issues. Mm-hmm. But the number one leading thing at the doors was education. Yeah. In Seminole and in Orange.
Yep. And I can tell you that when I've canvassed in Oviedo in particular in District 37 so far, the number of times that I've heard from people that are saying we have really wonderful schools here and I worry about them. Yeah, which is true. Seminole County has some of the best, and Orange County too, but Seminole County is one of the highest performing school districts in the state of Florida. Mm-hmm. Particularly in science and education, they were, I think, number 1 or 2 mm-hmm. This last year in science education. And so people move to Seminole County. Actually, this is a really good stat. In Seminole County, education is the number 1 economic driver.
Oh, for sure.
And that's unusual, right? And so it's people are really concerned about that because it's education is so fundamental to our community and our society and all of that stuff. And it's just. Yeah. Anyways.
Yeah. And I think there is this idea that if you pay for private education, you're getting better quality education. And a point that I know I've had other folks come on the podcast to kind of explain is that you don't need to be certified at mm-hmm. a private institution. No. And if you continue to defund public schools, you're defunding really good quality, highly monitored and guaranteed certified professionals educating your children.
Yeah. Yeah. I actually had one time somebody say to me that they didn't believe necessarily that you needed to have a certified teacher in the classroom. And I was interested because whenever somebody says something like that to me, I'm always interested in where they're coming from. Yeah. From that. And I think it's a fundamental misunderstanding of what goes on in a classroom, mm-hmm. right? Or what it takes to teach. Because the reason that certification is important is not just understanding, curriculum and kind of the basics of, pedagogy is such a particular thing. Mm-hmm. And there are best practices for how to teach. And then obviously putting that into experience. So going through things like mentorship programs and that kind of stuff, which you have to do in order to become certified. Mm-hmm. So not only do you have to be a subject matter expert, if you're teaching middle or high school, typically you have to have some sort of subject matter expertise. But you also need to have this pedagogical training that is going to let you know that these are the best practices. Here's how we differentiate for students with different exceptionalities. For instance, here's how we work with students who are ELL, so they are English language learners, right? Here's how we worked with gifted students. Here's how you work in a classroom that has 20 different needs and differentiations necessary, which is the hardest thing about teaching, is figuring out how to reach the most students where they are, right? Because I taught at a school that I believe was 40% ESC it was 40% IEP or 504. So that means that 40% of those students had some sort of plan and need for differentiation. You need somebody who understands why that's important, right? To differentiate for each individual student, how to read those plans, right? 100%. For instance, and then also how to implement them.
And in these circumstances, are you given lesson plans? Or are you having to write lesson plans for each student's particular needs?
So it depends. It depends on what you're doing. So sometimes people are using lesson plans offered by the district, and then you adjust them to their particular needs and that kind of thing. It's a learning process. I mean, I went from teaching higher ed to teaching high school, and I needed to figure out, kind of what that looked like in action. And that's one of those things, like if I could wave a magic wand in terms of funding and figure out how to help better support our schools, it would be for caseworkers, for students who need IEPs and that kind of thing. And also for support staff, because for the school that I was working in, we had one caseworker for the entirety of the school, and we had 40% 504 and IEP. I mean, that's too much for one person.
That's crazy.
Right. And so I think that you really need people to be able to work with that. But it's, not everybody can get up and teach effectively, right? So
it boggles my mind that there was someone, which this didn't happen overnight, like private schools and the private school lobby. And frankly, like typically it's the Christian evangelical push for privatization of our school systems so that they can interlink religion into their lesson plans. That has been something that's been happening since before we were even born, trying to siphon public money out of our school systems to be able to discriminate and be able to kind of indoctrinate kids in order to believe more in their typically conservative leanings. Do you feel like that's something that the voucher program is really trying to push in Florida right now?
Yeah, so I'm going to be kind of circumspect with my response to that. I think I understand. So I with the voucher program, I never fault families for using that.
Yeah.
Right? I understand wanting to send your child to a religious school. Right. For instance, if that's where your values are, I understand wanting to send them there.
Or even a perceived better school.
Yes.
If the branding has been if we've been attacking public schools.
Yeah, absolutely. So I 100% understand that. I understand why they're so popular. I mean, it's unaccountable money. So even if you're homeschooling and you're just taking in that, whatever, $9,000, $8,000, and using that to keep your family afloat, right? That like, I understand the impulse to do that kind of thing. And I don't fault families for that. And I think that if we're going to have this conversation about upward mobility or wanting people to have more access to, so that your zip code doesn't determine the quality of your schools and that kind of thing, like we can have that conversation. Mm-hmm. We just can't do it to the detriment of our public schools.
Yeah.
So if you want to talk about having a fund for school vouchers so that people can go to private schools, for instance, or homeschool, it needs to be accountable and it needs to come from a different bucket of money.
Yeah.
It can't come from the same bucket of money as the public schools, mm-hmm. which is what's happening right now. So that's my thought process with that. I do think it's a concerted effort to privatize school districts and to delegitimize public school. I think that has been a concerted effort to do that. But my circumspect answer to that is that, like, okay, if you don't want to have a conversation about getting rid of vouchers and just focusing on our public school, then you can't do it to the detriment of our public schools.
100%.
Yeah.
100%. And I truly believe that everyone who is taking advantage of the voucher program is not looking at it in that way. They're looking at it as this is an opportunity, like a grant.
Yes.
To give my kid a better opportunity without understanding the full scope of the consequences of what it could do now we have 8 schools closing in Orange County Public Schools. And people are showing up to school board meetings so heated and so upset. And everyone's like, yeah, go to your state legislature, because at a certain point, we are siphoning off public money that should be generating access for all students equally. And instead are kind of, there's also been some claims of fraudulent activity with the voucher program. And there's been an audit that they saw, I can't remember what statistic it was, but a pretty sizable amount of the money was not going directly to bringing children into a better private education system anyway. But moral of the story is that people have to be politically aware of what's happening to our public school systems and with this voucher program, and hopefully vote better.
Yeah, I think so. I think that really understanding what the consequences of it are is important. Obviously, the vouchers have been huge. The affordability crisis is also huge for moving people out. Somebody brought up a good point that one of the issues with, for instance, elementary schools that are under-enrolled is that a lot of these neighborhoods, the cost of living has gone up exorbitantly. And so the kids age out of elementary school and new families can't move into the neighborhood. Yeah. And so that is just another kind of natural process that is a result of our affordability crisis in Florida as well. So it is, it's a number of things. And, but people really need to understand that when you go to these private schools, you're not necessarily getting that tip-top education that it seems like when they have, school uniforms and sort of this rigid, structure and really, really good-looking marketing and that kind of thing. So 2 of our best, in the area, like most academically rigorous private schools are Highland Prep and Trinity Prep here in Central Florida, and they don't take vouchers. They don't take those vouchers, and the reality is that if the majority of the people who use those vouchers for private school already were sending their kids to private school.
I see,
and so it's really just it's a grant for people who could already afford to send their kids to private school. That's part of the problem.
Yeah. And
because if you're able to find a place that is only charging $9,000 a year for private school, it's probably not providing the quality education that you would like to receive from there. They charge this, these $20,000, $30,000 a year because, frankly, that's how much it costs to maintain per student to do that. People don't really understand the overhead cost that the districts take on for infrastructure, for, staff pay, for that kind of thing, and how much it actually costs per student in order to maintain these facilities and keep these schools open and functioning and running and that kind of thing. The private schools do that, and they charge for it.
Yeah.
Right.
100%.
And they charge a premium for it. And so and frankly, if you could not afford to spend that $20,000, that $30,000 to send your kid to that school, you're not going to be able to afford $15,000 or $20,000 or whatever it is that you're spending there. So the kind of quality education that you're going to get out of that is not going to be what you think that it is.
And what do you think of this move to try and allow charter schools to take up space in public schools for free? I'm like, yeah. I don't, and mind you, I am so blind to this topic that in my head, it seems so ridiculous. And I'm like, maybe I'm missing something.
Yeah, it feels like that, right? So it is, it's that provision. So the Schools of Hope provision was snuck in there, I think on literally the last day of the budget process.
That's how it always is.
It was in there early on in the legislative session, and then they got rid of it. And then on the last day, they just snuck it in there. And it is a disaster.
What is the motivation?
Yeah. So just as a brief explanation for those that don't know. So these Schools of Hope charter schools, which I think that there are, and don't quote me on this. I mean, we could, but I think that there are 4 entities in Florida that are certified for being Schools of Hope providers. They now have the capability to go into school districts and go into under-enrolled schools and what is called co-location, meaning that they're effectively setting up their school inside of these public schools. Well, some of the big problems with that are that the public school, first of all, they can't say no. They're not allowed to say no. And then they have to provide all the infrastructure. So they get some money for transportation for the students. But any of like the building fees, like they don't pay rent for being there.
So if the roof caves in, the School of Hope is not helping to repair the roof.
It's the county that's going to help repair that.
Great.
Right. Yes. And there's all kinds of other issues with that. So like do the teachers go through the same rigorous background check process that the teachers for the district do? What about the administration? What if there's an emergency? Who is in charge of the emergency?
Who's liable?
Yeah, right. And do they have the same emergency preparedness processes for
who's paying the insurance to ensure that the kids are covered?
Right. Exactly. All of this stuff that is that the district then becomes accountable for, and there's no real plan in place for how that's going to work. So sometimes that's part of the panic with closing some of these schools is it better to close these schools than to allow the co-location there? We haven't, as far as I know, have not seen any, and I know that you're speaking with some school board members later and they'll have better information about that kind of thing. But there's really a lot of unknowns that go into what this will actually look like. And both Orange County and Seminole County have gotten a lot of requests from Schools of Hope for many different schools. I was talking to somebody in Seminole County who said that Seminole High School, for instance, which has thousands of students, was getting Schools of Hope applications and that kind of thing, because they're based on these metrics that don't really take into account like the actual functioning of the building. It's just basically square footage without thinking about like how, for instance, an ESOL classroom is used or yes, you have a classroom that only has 4 students at a time, but those are ESE students and they are required to be pulled out of class for, specific things or needs or that kind of thing. So it's ridiculous.
I can only imagine the different micro nightmares that we haven't even seen yet. Yeah. That are pending, that are just going to fall into the hands of either educators or the administration of said school. And it's all going to be subsidized with our tax dollars. Yeah. Do these charter schools get to discriminate on enrollment?
Absolutely. Yes.
That's the part that to me are public dollars, which, I work in Orange County. So like the procurement process and every dollar needs to be accounted for. And you're liable for a lawsuit if any company feels like they were discriminated against. I'm so shocked that siphoning public education money continues to be up for debate when other schools are going to be able to pick and choose who they serve and what their curriculum is without the state oversight.
And in a lot of cases, these Schools of Hope get higher per student funding than the districts do. And so these micro schools can get upwards of tens of thousands of dollars per student, which allows them to get resources for these students that public schools just don't have access to.
And if that school were to say, I don't want any more Black students, or I don't want any perceived gay students, would there be any accountability?
Well, I don't want to speak to that because that would be extreme. But because I mean, they're still covered by discrimination clauses, right? But what they can do is underperforming students, they can get rid of, the students who are not performing to their standards or that kind of thing. And it's sort of the problem with like the private schools, for instance, receiving public money is that private schools get to pick and choose their students. And if a student, for instance, has ADHD and needs their, exceptionality met in different ways, the private school does not have to differentiate for that. They don't have to offer accessibility services for that student. In fact, they can just tell that student's family that they can no longer be there. And public schools can't do that, right?
Of course not.
And you wouldn't want them to. And so but they're taking public dollars and not providing the same services. And in fact, they get to pick and choose their students. If they're low performing, they don't have to keep them there.
I mean, that's active discrimination. If you're low performing, there could be several factors, including even a disability, that they get to just choose that they don't want to serve.
Yeah. And it's the unaccountability is what pisses me off about this, right? That they passed this school voucher law, which, by the way, I mean, part of my frustration is that the person that I am running to unseat was the primary sponsor on that bill.
Susan Placencia.
So it's unaccountable money that they are now trying to reel back because they realize they did this audit and they realize that they can't account for $270 million that went out through this voucher program. I wrote down some statistics so that I had them here. They sent $47 million to families whose children were actually attending public school. They don't know where 30,000 students are, whether they're in public or private schools. They have no track record of where that happens. The money is not following the students if they leave that private school and go back to the public schools, right? And then they ended up having to reimburse Orange County public schools $4 million that they sent through the voucher program. And then on top of that, there are people who are double dipping the voucher money because they're not, it's unaccountable money, right? And it's the same thing for the Schools of Hope provisions, right? Is that they pass these laws with no guardrails, no plan, right? For how to do this.
It's a political headline so that they're able to run on, look what we did, without having the oversight to ensure that it's actually effective or that there's any accountability.
Yeah, that's the thing. And it's
a political stunt.
It's a political stunt, right? And it hurts all of us.
It hurts all of us. It hurts the next generation. It hurts, I ran the campaign for Commissioner Kelly Semrad. She would always talk about brain drain and how, we have graduating students that are just kind of being left with no opportunity here and leaving Florida. I feel like this is even bigger because you said when you have healthy, good schools, it's a huge economic driver. What type of economic missed opportunities do we have if we're continuously underfunding our public schools? Now, what industries would have come here and set up headquarters here in Central Florida that now won't because the schools are so terrible and, of course, the transportation is so terrible?
Well, yeah, there's a number of things because in order for companies to be attracted to being here, they need good schools. They want their employees to go, yes, I want to move there. I want my kids to grow up there. I want to make sure that the infrastructure necessary around us is good. And we talk a lot about just safety in this kind of thing, but that's not the only thing that people care about in their neighborhoods, right? And being a part of their communities. And it's really important, but it is not the school system just really matters.
Well, safety can be informed also by the education because when kids have something to do and it doesn't cost an arm and a leg to put them in like after school programs, they're usually doing less trouble. I grew up in Deltona, so we had a lot of gang violence. It's basically a suburban hellscape of nothing but just the same exact house from a developer over and over and over again. So many drugs, so many teen pregnancies, so much death from students killing each other because they were bored. There was no infrastructure to ensure that these kids had something healthy and happy to do. Lots of break-ins, especially of seniors, to steal their medications. And so I do think education and how good our school systems and what kind of after-school programs and investments we're doing to ensure that kids have overarching quality of life improvements inside and outside of the classroom help correlate some safety statistics at a certain point.
Yeah. I mean, we talk about wraparound services, right? And we talk about that in terms of like housing, but it's also important in terms of school. If you want students to be able to learn, like they can't have these, these other circumstances, like they're, if they're unhoused, for instance, or they are living in unsafe circumstances, that also makes it impossible for them to learn, right? And I'm going to be real about that for just a second.
Please do. I love getting real.
One thing that I learned when I was teaching high school is something that I'm only 33, right? And I hadn't really considered this. And something that teachers, the best teachers, and in particular, really provide for students. It never occurred to me how important it is for kids, particularly adolescents, to have a trusted adult who is not their parent.
Yeah.
And who can model boundaried behavior, and that models interest in them and their interests, that is not necessarily related to a family member. And I think that, I think I'm not going to sit here and say that parents' rights are bad, right? Like the parents should be really involved in decision making for their kids, right? I want that. I wish that more parents were involved in, in the school system. But I think that it erodes the importance of the teachers are in as community members, right? As members of this village. And to your point, when you're talking about safety and students having some place to go or something to do, having those relationships with trusted adults that are boundaried, that care about them and their well-being, that is something that exists in our public schools.
Oh,
those
100%.
People are there, right? They are there with open arms. They hold their classrooms open for clubs and activities. They coach in addition to teaching. That all exists in our public schools.
They're kind of like mini therapists in the classroom too.
Absolutely. I'm an English teacher. There's a lot of jokes about the English teachers and the art teachers, right?
Yeah.
And being the classrooms that collect the kids. And it is, people that you can go to and know that they're safe, right?
That's the biggest part that scares the crap out of me about the voucher program is the stay-at-home component of homeschooling. Not because I disagree with homeschooling as a whole, but there should still be some level of oversight. Because, I came from abusive parents. I had, addicts as parents. And those teachers in the classroom, they saved me many times. I actually have a godmother who sent money to one of my teachers to make sure I was able to get a yearbook and tickets to prom and even just shampoo for my hair. My dad just completely neglected me. I literally wouldn't have food. And having teachers make sure that they're doing those check-ins and frankly, just giving me tons of crap to do so I can get my bright futures and have extra hours. I had teachers just making sure that I painted murals in the classroom or rearranged all their supplies and did things for hours. But it was the teachers taking on that extra responsibility to make sure that they had eyes on me. There was always another motive. And I knew I could tell they were trying to make it seem like, oh, you're helping me. But I knew they were really looking out for me. Yeah. And if I didn't have those things, God only knows, I could be one of those pregnant teens. I could be, we want to get real. I was going through so much emotionally, I was inflicting self-harm as a kid. And I had teachers. We got to applaud teachers. I had teachers saving my life, basically. One of my literature teachers, he used to let me eat lunch and hang out after school when he was grading papers just to talk shit and just hang. God only knows where I would be without those relationships because the stability at home was non-existent. And I think that people are experiencing so much pressure with affordability and all these things that when they have a kid, sometimes inadvertently, school just becomes childcare.
Yeah.
And that relationship and that quality of life and those metrics to show that there's improvements happening spiritually with your child, cognitively, it's more than just whether or not they passed or failed some like test.
Yeah.
You know, and we need to get back to that in order to make sure that we're healthy as a society.
Yeah. We need to think of teachers, the administration, staff, the people that work in these schools are partners in upbringing and bringing up children, not the enemy, right? And or not people who are working against your, the way that you want to raise your child or something like that. That they're partners in their journey, right? And because ultimately, I mean, every teacher that I know, that is how they work in the world, right? Is that they understand the importance that they take up in students' life. I mean, students spend 7 hours a day in school. That's a lot of time.
And then sent home to do homework with their parents. And it's like, if they don't have that structure at home, then how can they keep up? So how did you go from, the public school system into, higher education?
Well, I finished my PhD. I've been working in higher ed for the last 8 years. I never stopped. So even when I was teaching in public schools, I was also adjuncting at Rollins College. So I continued forward with that. And then I got a postdoc right after I finished my PhD at the University of Florida. And so I ended up going up there and teaching there for a little while. And then I got a lectureship at the University of Central Florida, which was great because I was commuting from Central Florida up to Gainesville to teach, which was not ideal. So it was great to be close. And so I made the transition to full-time in higher ed. And I really, really enjoy it. Obviously, higher ed in Florida has, a litany of issues as well.
Also culture wars.
Yes, that is primarily, yes.
Our campuses.
Yeah, it is. And a lot of, overreach into, and threatening intellectual freedom and that kind of thing. And, for under the guise of saying that they're, protecting intellectual freedom. And so that's obviously has its own thing with funding and that kind of stuff. But I really love my students at UCF and have been some of the best students that I've ever had at UCF. And so
I loved my literature courses in Seminole State College and UCF. So much fun. I'm not even a big reader. I would never really grew up just like diving into books, but just trying to piece together why things are the way that they are today, or have art kind of inform where we are as a society. It's like, I'll never take for granted how powerful art can be when you feel like you're not heard by your politicians, or when artists get it and they just find another way to speak to the masses that I just find so brilliant.
Yeah, it's a means of processing what's happening, in the world and around them. And, I love when we find a text as a class where students are really reacting to it in this really raw way, and because they're coming to it and they're saying, oh, like I see myself in this, I see my experience, or I didn't understand that other people were experiencing things. I mean, that's ultimately what studying literature and art does. Is it helps us develop empathy for other people, for understanding all diverse experiences, and then also to think critically, right, about how we are working in the world, how we are a part of our world, and getting rid of that, for some sterile version of whatever whether it's history or the kinds of literature that we're choosing or that kind of thing is, I mean, it's a real loss, right? To foreclose on the kinds of narratives that people are able to or encouraged to engage with.
Oh my God. Yeah. I remember going to different museums across, Boston and throughout the United States, and just learning about like the fights that different artists had to do in order to get their art seen, like Picasso and, even Van Gogh, like different. At certain times, the art was restricted because people were kind of scared of what it would do to the masses rather than just being embraced as, artists should be. And I see that in the front lines of our education right now, where students are kind of having a little bit of an awakening due to social media and having all this access to information, that the state legislature is trying so hard to restrict people's ability to educate around certain books and certain pieces of art because they don't want like a little gay kid to be able to see themselves in a book, because they want to find every way possible to suppress that, mostly because we can't really control kids' ability to experience new things because we have just a surplus of information running through our fingertips on our phones. And so it's really, I look at policies like that as a fear of change, and that we are just escalating this shift in our culture where information is kind of being exposed in ages that would be unfathomable just one generation ago. And yet as an educator, I would assume, because like I said, I have my associate's degree in education. I dreamed of being able to play in that space, exposing kids to new ideas and like being Miss Frizzle of the classroom and letting kids build on their character right in front of your eyes. I would assume that you transitioned into this work for that same drive, of enlightening people.
Yeah, those light bulb moments are the best, right? When you see somebody suddenly get it, it's really really incredible. Or when students really this happens all the time when they really surprise you with an interpretation, something, because most of the time I'm teaching texts that I've read a million times, right? And then they come in and they're like, I saw it this way, and it's because they brought themselves to the text, and it's something that I've never thought of before, and it's these such brilliant moments of teaching, right? Where you are watching somebody in real time, not just engage with the subject matter, but to also kind of pull that critical thinking drive out of themselves and to have the confidence to offer it out to the world is like, I mean, to be thoughtful is really incredible. One of my favorite classes when I was teaching since I've been teaching at UCF is that my first semester, we had our last class out on the lawn, and it was a beautiful day. It's the end in November. And we were reading Tommy Orange's There, and which is a beautiful book. It is devastating, but it is a beautiful book. And it talks about all kinds of things, indigeneity, disability, the way somebody forms their identity. It talks about growing up in abusive households and also, kind of mixed family systems. I mean, all of these things that are just really difficult, meaty topics, right? And I remember my class sitting around and we just, at this kind of devastating end of this book, and people are crying. They're having these like really thoughtful discussions about like this text and how it's impacted them over time. And it was this moment of just like, oh my God, like they really got this. Like this was, they saw this other perspective for life that was offered by this person, and they took it on and they went, I'm having a moment of sight that I haven't had before. And it's that kind of thing that's really beautiful about teaching too.
Why is that so scary?
What do you mean?
Why would someone want to legislate that away?
Oh, yeah, I don't know. I just, that's the kind of thing that is like, that drives me crazy because, and it's part of the reason why I'm running is that I want people making education policy who have actually been in a fucking classroom before. Yeah. Excuse my French.
Oh, you're allowed to curse on this podcast.
And, like, it's not that hard, right? Or that at least are willing to engage with people who are in that space to actually ask what their lived experience is before making policy. And that happens, Frank, I'm going to be honest, on both sides. It is not just the Republicans who are doing that. 100%. Democrats also put education policy forward that has consulted 0 teachers in the making of that education policy. And so I really, really want to be able to engage with people who are actual stakeholders in that conversation.
I think we need more corporate lobbyists to run for office, actually.
I'm clipping that and I'm posting it on social media.
Trust me. Yes, I think a lot of people would love to do that.
Yeah.
So you're running for office, which I always try to take, because you're artistic, you're an educator. I always try to tell people part of why I love running candidates and running campaigns is because you get to do those things. You get to be an educator and an artist. You get to almost be like a philosopher that's going out like Socrates or something and like speaking to the masses. And I love that concept because frankly, a lot of people don't have time and are kind of disgusted by our political arena. And being young and seeing that you have to play politics in the way that it's always been done. Isn't it fun to have a chance to run a campaign where you can break that mold a little bit and say, let's try something new?
Yeah, I think that I'm still figuring out what it means to run a campaign as myself. Because I'm creative and a little punky and just, in a positive way. And what that means as far as like kind of coming through personality wise, because I don't think that I'm a traditional politician. I did not come into the world thinking that I was going to go into politics. Every time I've stepped into the political foray, it's been out of an understanding of need, right? And frankly, a little bit of rage. So yeah, I mean, it's really cool. It's a learning process. I feel like I'm learning something new every day. I have a lot of anxiety around. In a classroom, speaking is absolutely no problem. Getting up in front of a class and like having that larger conversation. Speaking at a political event is a completely different format.
Oh, it's so much fun.
It's a completely different format. And I find myself I'm not really like a rah kind of speaker. I'm a very thoughtful speaker. Not that those two things can't be true at the same time. It's just that it's a different energy or whatever. So I'm trying to kind of figure that out.
Well, I think something happened in my brain. I was a climate activist in college and turned it into a nonprofit where we were able to do global climate organizing. And I hated being in front of the camera. I was so terrified of talking in front of people. But I was so desperate to educate people about what's coming when it comes to climate change and what they could do. And I just wanted to like shake people and be like, wake up. And that's when I learned that public speaking can be that conduit. And then when 2020 hit and the pandemic with, how red Florida went, I said, oh, well, politics could be that too.
Yeah.
You can wake people up and enlighten them spiritually, as well as inform yourself to inform others. And really campaigns feel so like transactional. It's like, vote for me. But if you throw that out and you just get to the root of, I have something to say that I know will hit you because I know we're all suffering. We're all suffering with affordability. We're all suffering with brain drain of the next generation not having adequate education. We're all suffering from lack of transportation and we're the pedestrian fatality capital of the world, and we have more traffic problems than a city with double our population. We're all suffering these issues, and it's like a chance to get in front of them, plus sprinkle some of your fun, quirky personality on top of that. Who wouldn't fall in love with that? Because frankly, Susan Placencia, your opponent, is non-existent. She doesn't even have office hours. She's not waking up anyone. I think the only reason why people voted for her is because people knew her brother, and her brother wasn't really MAGA. You know, he was a little bit more middle of the road, willing to work with people. And now she's just abandoned her base completely.
Yeah. And that was my frustration, was just that no matter what side of the aisle you are on, everybody deserves enthusiastic, present representation.
Yeah.
Everyone
pick up the phone.
That. Yeah. It's a responsive representation. Everyone deserves that. And so it's, that is part of the frustration. And I do enjoy, the best part of campaigning so far, has really been meeting so many cool people like yourself who are doing good work. It lifts my spirits, and it gives me a lot of hope. And, because people, I see it every day when I'm teaching that, people have a lot of this generation is lost, or this is, whatever. The kids are all right. I can promise you that. The kids are all right. There are some things that they struggle with that are different than what our generation struggled with. And I could yell all day about the use of ChatGPT in my classroom. But ultimately, they get it. And the things that young people struggle with are the things that the rest of us are struggling with. And I don't, this is kind of a little bit of a tangent, but I get really frustrated when I see people kind of treating young people as a just sort of like niche voting block, and not human beings who have the same struggles and interests and need for communication and representation as everybody else.
100%.
Right. It's not fair, and it's not true. And to say that they are something different, or that, and that's where you get a lot of issues when you have politicians who are way too old to continue, doing that work, and how about not old, too far removed from the issues that are affecting younger generations. Because it's not, being older is not an issue in and of itself. It's when people are removed from those problems. So it's, that's something that I've just been really conscious of as I'm campaigning. So
what lit your light bulb when you were like, I'm going to run? Did you wake up one day and you're like, I'm going to go file?
It was a little bit that, but it was mostly that I was really frustrated at the beginning of the year, like everybody else, with what's been going on. And obviously I've been an educator in Florida for the last 5 years. So it's, the kind of policy that's coming down has been something that has been very top of brain for me. Yeah. It's also that we're 50th in teacher pay in the country. And I'm married now, but I was a single teacher living on a single teacher's salary, and it's insane. And so that is something that has been, top of brain. But then obviously in the beginning of the year, I was really frustrated, and I was doing more and more, kind of looking into what our representation is like, that kind of thing. And the last straw for me was actually seeing that Placencia's office staff had locked UCF students out of her, they came to deliver a petition to them, and they locked them out of the office and said that it was office policy.
To lock people out?
Their constituents out of the office.
Okay.
And I saw that, and I was just like, oh my God, that's, that was kind of it for me. And I reached out to Orange County, and I was like, I will help whoever is running in this seat. I will do it, but I will also help whoever is doing this. I'll be front of brain. And, Samuel called me and was like, well, I've got some good news for you. Yes. Yeah.
The recruitment call.
So it was not I put it in there saying I will do this, but I did not think in a million years that somebody would be like, yes, we're excited that you reached out to us. That was not something that I was conscious, that I was thinking at that time. I remember walking in, looking at my husband, Scott, and saying, I think that they like actually want me to run.
And Scott was like,
he's like, of course they do. He's like my number one fan. He was the one that like pushed me into doing this. He's like, of course they do. You're great.
That's wonderful. Yeah. That's so good that you have a supportive partner, because that's always a conversation that sometimes could be good or bad is, I'm going to run and become very much the spotlight. And you might also become a spotlight a little bit on the campaign trail. So I'm glad to hear that you have a good support network. Now, Tallahassee, you have, obviously education is one of your major issues that you want to fight for. There's so much going on up there. It is a very toxic space, but you have one of the few seats that could be flipped. It's actually out of the top 2 most flippable districts. It's the flippable.
Yeah, it's the number district. 1. Yeah, it's the number 1 target.
So, hopefully you're going to be receiving some attention from the Democratic Party and some funds. But I'm just curious, like, what are you hoping to run up to Tallahassee to fight for outside of education?
Outside of education, God, there are so many things. But a couple things. One is when we're talking about tackling the affordability crisis, we need to have nuanced discussions about real community-centered solutions to, for instance, affordable housing, right? That are not just Tallahassee telling people what they're going to do, but that are coming into the community, talking to stakeholders and figuring out how we can best work together in order to make this kind of affordable housing happen, for instance. Another thing is that, and I know that like there's been petitions and this kind of thing, I would be another voice in Tallahassee for expanding Medicaid in Florida, obviously. I've talked to so many folks who just, and even, I'll tell you that one of the things that was really frustrating for me when I decided to run into this or just jump into this is I had a student who came to me and I was helping them get services because they came to me and they were like, hey, I have bipolar disorder. My parents cut me off. I can no longer afford my medication and I'm really scared. And so I was working with the school to get them services for that. And it's just, and then I had another student who had been in an accident and couldn't afford to go to the doctor for that, but they had chronic pain as a result of the accident and were struggling even just to work. And it's just so unacceptable. We need better funding for community medical resources, so clinics and that kind of thing. And we need to expand Medicaid so that more people have access to medical care in Florida. That is something that I really care. And that ties into the affordability thing too. And we can have a number of conversations around like pushing back against these insane policies like eliminating property taxes. We can have a discussion about reforming the property tax system that doesn't include going at it with a baseball bat.
It feels like everything they try to do is just something that is for a political push through the next election cycle. It's not really long-term thinking at all.
Absolutely not. It's not long-term. It is hack and slash, and it is just, it has no, because I think that people take for granted that the public has an appetite for nuance, right? I get that people are driven by slogans and things like that they want quippy things that they can easily digest and that kind of thing. And oftentimes the Democrats get mired in providing too long of an explanation for something, right? That we need to have more quicker, more accessible ways of talking about these things. But that doesn't mean that we need to get rid of nuance entirely, especially when we're espousing policy positions, right? 100%. That, saying we need to get rid of property taxes is so lacking any kind of nuanced understanding or thinking of like what those systems actually do.
But it meets the moment of desperation that I think people feel. And unfortunately, for folks that are moving a million miles a minute, drowning in, their property insurance costs and the cost of living, like I'm so scared that it's going to work.
Yeah.
That it's going to work because people are so desperate. And there hasn't been this equal moment where Democrats, especially in Florida, are rising to the occasion to really show their empathy for this affordability crisis.
Yeah.
In their messaging.
Yeah. I mean, I think that we have a number of great advocates here in Central Florida, but I do think that we need to say, I completely understand where you're coming from on this. I understand why this is sexy and why people need relief, because they do need relief, right? I mean, the housing insurance, crisis that has been brewing for such a long time that they've done virtually nothing to help reform in 30 years, like that. People need relief, and people who own their homes are getting priced out of their homes for that reason. And then in addition to that, people who rent their homes are getting priced out of their homes because costs are going up, right? As a result of that. So we need to have these conversations. We need to be empathetic towards the reason why people might like that. And then we need to turn it around and say, let's actually talk about the consequences of this, right? And I think that what I am hearing, and I'm not saying that everybody is doing this, but I hear a lot of like, well, where are we going to fund fire and police and schools and that kind of thing? It's like, which is in so important, right? To say that like all of this stuff comes from our property tax funding, right? But sometimes that doesn't connect with people. What I have found at the doors that does connect with folks is saying, do you think that Tallahassee knows better how to spend money for your community than your community leaders? And then explaining that if they get rid of property taxes, every red cent that comes to your community has to be approved by Tallahassee.
Right.
And that pisses people off.
100%. I think preemption explained in that way really helps people understand that they're losing their control.
Yes, that they're losing local control, and that the community leader that they voted for will no longer be able to actually advocate for their community in a way that is effective, because Tallahassee has come in and said that they know better.
And I specifically, the Republican Party is supposed to be like so against big government that these overarching and overreaching policies that are preempting our local, elected officials, that's robbing residents of their ability to have a say wholeheartedly. And I think people get that. And I think Republicans understand that. The problem is that, do we have more forward-thinking Democrats speaking to those issues directly and going out and even knocking on doors? We are very lucky and gifted in the Central Florida area to have awesome, legislators. But we need the entire state to be in lockstep, and we need to have people that are willing to do TikTok videos and going live on Twitch and doing things that are outside of the box of just canvassing, because we're missing the boat on how people get their information.
Yeah.
Which is why everybody and their mother has a podcast, because we're just eager to get eyes on real information that is affecting people in their everyday lives. And it's so hard to do that if you have an elected official like Susan Placencia, who won't even open up her door to take office visits from her constituents. It's really ridiculous.
No, it is ridiculous. And it lacks. So the core, I'll tell you, so the core of my policy platform and really truly where I'm coming from in terms of my political beliefs is this true belief that we, at our core, we all want the same things, right? We want our ourselves and our families to live in comfort and dignity. We want them to be healthy, and we want them to be safe. Everybody wants that, right? The politics occur in how we make sure all of that happens, but we need to agree on those things. And if we can figure that out, then we can have a more empathetic, more effective political process. But we can't forget that we all want those things. Every single person, comfort and dignity, healthy, safe, all want that. And so I think that has gotten quite lost, and that it's not, we need to make sure that we're returning to this idea that like all of us, kind of no matter where we fall on the spectrum, do want those things. I mean, I guess unless you're like a psychopath or something like that. I just can't think of a single example.
A lot of people are being lied to. They're being lied to make this is the playbook since before we were even born. Mm-hmm. Fear mongering a marginalized population, so that they are the root of all of your problems, and not like the corporations that have the greatest ear to any legislator in Tallahassee that is opening the door for them more than their own constituents.
Yeah.
At the end of the day, I actually had Eric Gray on, and he said, this is not left or right. It's up, top and bottom.
Correct.
And I think most, especially Republicans, understand that Tallahassee in so many ways is being gripped by special interests, mm-hmm. and it makes it almost impossible for the little guy to be heard. Mm-hmm. And I also just bring up clean water a lot because we have so many cancer clusters, so many lupus clusters. We have a lot of health issues. And especially when it comes to emissions and our lack of public transportation, we have a lot of birth defects that are happening in our community, a lot of health issues that are stemming from somewhere. And they're quick to think vaccines are the problem, or they're quick to say that, our food is the problem, which in many ways it is. But we have to talk about health in a very, very profound way. And I think Republicans, especially many that are on the conservation side, they understand that a good quality investment in our ecosystems and our environment are going to make our entire community healthier. So I've always used the environment as a conduit of that partisan dialogue. Mm-hmm. Because, you live out in an area that has a really robust rural boundary. And mm-hmm. I know that out in both Seminole and Orange, the rural boundary means everything to them. Not just, and they totally get this, not just because they care about the environment and clean drinking water. Yep. They understand that their tax dollars are better spent where infrastructure already exists, mm-hmm. than spending $25 million per mile of new road to pave into 100-year-old, beautiful, pristine, untouched forests. And that's a cost that is bared on existing residents to open up the gateway for profitability of future residents to come here for mm-hmm. some mega developer that's cashing out. So I say that because when you bring up health, there's so many different ways to talk about safety and health and bringing communities together so that it doesn't have to be this vile attack on partisan issues.
For sure. That's what I mean when I say the politics mm-hmm. occur in how we get there, right? Yeah. Is that also talk about like people are like, well, what's your platform? It's like, well, we can talk about three things. We can talk about education, affordability, and healthcare, but let's not pretend like all of those things aren't together, right? Yeah. And that when we're talking about environment, we're also talking about affordability, and we're talking about healthcare, mm-hmm. and we're talking about education, right? Like all of these things are very interwoven and connected in a way that we have to be able to have I'm going to go back to just using this word again, right? That we have to have a tolerance for nuance, right? We need leaders who have a tolerance for nuance, right? To say that all of these, when you're developing an area, right? For instance, you have to take into account, like when I was first talking to folks a little bit more about like the issues with the rural boundary and that kind of thing, trying to become more educated, point out that if you develop some of these lands, it's going to worsen flooding issues in mm-hmm. the rest of so it's not even, we're going beyond just talking about like how morally bankrupt it is to just develop these lands for the sake of it, right? Or whatever. It's also that it makes people less safe mm-hmm. to do that. And which then in turn also causes health issues. You think about flooding leading to mold, right? Mm-hmm. For instance, yes, it impacts the water table and our drinking water. It impacts so many other things that are all interwoven. And then you talk about economic stability, right? If you're living in a flood zone, your insurance is going to be higher. You have to carry extra flood insurance in some cases. And if your home it does flood, recovery process for that can take an eternity. And there's no guarantee that your insurance company will actually pay out what you're owed. Mm-hmm. And so all of these things, the insurance crisis, the environment, affordability, healthcare, all this stuff is all wrapped up in one another. And it was going to require a tolerance for nuance in order to come up with policies that are addressing each of these issues.
And putting empathy back in to those conversations as well.
Yeah.
Because you brought up, learning empathy through reading and art and getting to experience that empathy engine and teaching. Politics is exactly the same way. I think a lot of people are so worried about mine and my children, but your entire community is a network and it all feeds into each other. We're not as individualistic as sometimes we act as a society. And so I'm so excited to watch your talents unfold on the campaign trail and to see you get into Tallahassee and to flip that seat, because if any year we're going to do it,
I hope so.
It is the year after we see such extremism happening from the federal level down and people are just over it.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I ask everybody this final question before they go, because you're going to be go. What do you do to replenish yourself after you're exhausting yourself at every level, educating and campaigning? How do you replenish yourself spiritually?
So I am a painter, so I paint quite a bit. I do that. I'm kind of a tinkerer in a way. So I work on some like miniature making projects and that kind of thing. That's when I'm being creative. And when I'm in less of an energetically creative mood, I am a big gamer. So I do a lot of that, where I come home from something that's particularly stressful and then sit down and play a video game for a while.
I love the idea of you playing video games, because it's like, it just makes you an even cooler teacher.
Well, most people don't believe that I do that, which is really funny to me. But yeah, that's because my husband's also a huge gamer. So we sit next to each other. Like this weekend, I was playing Diablo 4 for a long time.
Funny.
And he was sitting next to me with a separate screen playing World of Warcraft. Like a bunch of nerds. No, we do play together, but it was just an instance where he wanted to play something else. So we were just, playing next to each other. It was very fun.
That is so cool. Yeah, I played Diablo 3 a lot.
So I am also a huge Diablo 3 person.
Yep. I played it so much. I remember one time I played 17 hours in a row. And I remember looking at the clock and being like, I have a problem. I need to stop.
Yeah. Yes. That's so this is actually a very funny tidbit that I'm going to share with you. But I still play a lot of Diablo 3, and I kind of go between Diablo 3 and 4, and which is still active. And I am a Sorc main usually on a Wizard, I guess, on Diablo 3. And my husband just bought me a trophy as a joke, because last season I made it to the top 20 on console in my class for my class set. And then I was like in the top 400 overall on console for my class. So he bought me, I was 388. He bought me a trophy that was like commemorating the top 20.
What a good husband.
It's very funny. But yes, I'm a tryhard with those kinds of things.
What a good husband. Wow. What a good story. So, do you play Magic?
I play Magic the Gathering and D&D.
My husband plays Magic like hard.
Yeah.
We got to get you guys some
we're going to have to do that. Yes.
Yeah. I can't keep up. I'm just too simple-minded to understand all the rules. But
it feels like a lot more math than it actually is.
Yeah. I like to be the one that stands in the back and like talk shit and make everybody snacks.
Yes. Well, we can maybe get you like a cute meme deck or something like that and figure it out.
Well, yes. He just got Avatar deck. He just got an Avatar deck.
Amazing.
The Last Airbender. So
yes.
Amazing. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much. Now it's time for you to plug your website, your social media, and all the things. How can people help you, and what are your biggest needs needs on the campaign trail?
Sure. So if you want more information, you can go to janeforflorida.com. It's Jane and FOR Florida.com. You can also follow me on Instagram at JaneForFlorida. I also have Twitch at JaneForFlorida, and YouTube, but we'll stick with Twitch right now and Facebook as well. So I'm on all of that stuff. You can follow me. And right now we're really going to hit the ground hard canvassing in the, I always refer to it as spring because I think in terms of academic semesters, but in the new year. So we will hit the ground hard. So if you want to volunteer in any capacity, there's a sign up form on janeforflorida.com. Obviously we're running a grassroots efforts here. So if you feel called to make a $5, $20 donation, then that is always
$500
or $500. Yes. Any and all help is really important to helping us get over the finish line in November. Like Lee said, it's the closest flip seat in Florida, separated by 450 votes last year. And we expect that we'll be able to get it over the finish line, but not without support. So
450 votes is so easy to get if you have a really good volunteer base that's hitting doors. I mean, I personally, in just the course of like 2 hours, I could hit 100 doors. Mm-hmm. You can have enough people out and about. And I remember specifically running this campaign on election day, hitting doors, and people were like, there's an election going on, and being like, go right now. Yeah. And people would get in their car right there when I'm at the door. Mm-hmm. That times 10 of you out and about could be the vote that she needs to get over the finish line. What does that mean? That means next time that somebody wants to pass some outlandish bill, she will be up there giving them hell and getting in their face about it and holding them accountable so that they're not, underserving your community. Yeah.
Can I give you like one last tidbit?
Please.
So I didn't work this in earlier, but the model for me for getting up to Tallahassee, and one thing that I can always remember is Wendy Davis in Texas, who filibustering this awful abortion bill that Texas was trying to pass. And I believe that was in 2016, I believe is when that went through. And now, again, don't quote me on that. I can't remember the exact year, but I was living in Texas at the time. And she stood up there for hours and hours and hours and hours to filibuster this bill. And she was like, you're going to have to drag me out of this chamber before I stop talking because this bill is so horrendous. And that is the kind of model for me. So like, you want somebody up there who's fighting for you, another voice, that kind of thing. Like, I want to be your drag me off the floor politician that's going to be there advocating for you.
She will wear a diaper. And talk for 20 hours on the floor.
I mean, I'm a yapper. I can talk for a long time.
And hydrate extra the night before to ensure that she doesn't pass out. Well, I'm so excited because I know how badly we need that. Mm-hmm. And as someone who's trying to lay a foundation here in Florida, I'm so terrified of what the future holds if we keep allowing this conservative Republican controlled legislature go unchecked. Mm-hmm. And, it got really scary this year in 2025, even working with Commissioner Semrad, where they were threatening to remove her and fine her thousands of dollars a day just for trying to speak up for our migrant community. Those phone calls are terrifying, being on the phone, trying to figure out where are her kids going to go? Are we going to be able to do this? Are we going to do a press conference? It's the real deal right now. History is repeating itself. And the only way we're going to toe the line and fight fascism and fight this really conservative takeover of our community is if we elect people who are going to be outspoken, who are going to be willing to put themselves on the front lines. And I believe that is you.
Well, thank you. I hope I can live up to that. So do my best.
Well, I'm so excited. So please help Jane knock on doors and visit her website. All the details will be in the description, and we'll chat next time. Thank you for being here.
Thanks so much.
Thank you. Thank you so much for watching. If you like what you heard today, please comment, subscribe, and share. And visit organizingtovictory.com so that you can learn more about all the ways that we're going to be organizing this year. It is the most important election year of our lives. I know you hear that all the time, but we here at Organizing to Victory hope to not just talk about the issues, but to organize around the issues. So please share, subscribe, and follow us. And we'll see you on the next one.